My name is Dr. Michael Brown, and this is 3 Words, a bite-sized podcast about the simple and yet very strategic choices that all of us can make in order to be fully alive. Today, my conversation with Pastor Sammy. We weren't even sure we're going to do this conversation because it was a little bit weird, these 3 words. We didn't know what people would think. It's a little bit challenging and difficult and even a bit provocative. We'll see what you think. Listen in. So, Sammy, you are becoming a common guest here in the 3 Words podcast studio, which is amazing because I feel like your wisdom and your insight is way beyond your years. So thanks for being here again today. For our viewers and listeners who don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Sammy, born and raised in Nigeria. I got 5 girls. I'm a pastor of a church here in Toledo, Ohio, and I get to write and I get to tour and hang out with some pretty cool bands here and there. So,
with really cool bands. You actually are on world tours with who do you travel with?
Maverick City Band. I've done some stuff with Toby Mac. I just did a Chris Tomlin tour this spring. So
so those who listen to Christian music, you're going to know those names. And I noticed you're wearing a shirt today. If you are actually viewing us on our YouTube channel, Soma City Church in Toledo, Ohio. Actually, Teresa and I are honored, Pastor Sammy, to be a part of your church community. And it's kind of interesting. We weren't in your church community for a while. I was actually your life coach.
That's right.
And now you become my pastor. And it's really, really cool. And I think in many ways, kind of your pastoral role and the high visibility of who you are ties into these 3 words for today.
You ready?
I am.
It's a big one. Be more competitive.
Really? As a pastor, are you allowed to say that out loud?
I don't know if I'm allowed, but I'm going to say it anyways.
Yeah, I think it's great, though, because, again, I like this conversation because we're going to frame it in a very interesting way, I would presume. Because obviously, when we hear about being competitive, there's a dark side to that. And I'm sure that some people, when they hear that, are like, wait, I shouldn't be more competitive. I should be less competitive because it's kind to be less competitive. It's more generous and selfless to be more noble to be less competitive. But you're saying, no, be more competitive. You got to tell us more about this.
Okay. So here's one thing I learned. I realized that even people who say they're not competitive are actually competitive, right? And so we're all competitive. We're just competitive about different things. And so one of the things I've come to learn is that the problem is not really that we're competitive. The problem is that we're competitive oftentimes about the wrong things. At least I can speak for myself, right?
Okay.
I've always been competitive. I'm competitive about being competitive. I want to win at everything. And so for the longest time, I try to suppress that. I try to be like, all right, I just got to be noble and humble. And then it was just so life-giving for me to realize that no, if I could change my scorecards and make sure I'm competitive about the right things, that's actually sometimes the most loving thing that I can do, not just for myself, but for the world that's around me.
So have you ever been in a situation where you feel like, wait, there's this moment where I feel like I'm feeling competitive, but the scorecard is wrong?
My whole life, but I'll give you a recent example, and I don't blame anybody if they judge me for this. I went with some of the speakers and pastors at our church that communicate and teach. We went to a conference that was for speakers and communicators, about 2,000 people, and we're in the room. I walk in the room. Within minutes, one of the first thoughts that came to my mind was, if they had a draft of the best preachers in this room, would I be in the top 3? You know, I'm looking around the room like, I wonder if I'm better than that guy, and I caught myself. I'm like, I'm at a pastor's preacher's conference, and I'm comparing myself to see where I stack up in there. And I realize a lot of times when we do that, obviously it's my insecurity that's speaking and the need to kind of fill that gap. And so I went back to my hotel and I was like, man, that's not who I want to be. And so then I thought, okay, what if we switch the scorecard around, and what if I'm actually competitive about the things that mattered? And so one thing that came to my mind, I was like, you know what gets me excited is I would love to be in the top 3 in this room of the most grateful people in the room. And so imagine if I could walk into a room of 2,000 pastors and go, man, nobody is more grateful and humble to get to do what we do than I am. Like that got me excited.
Here we go.
I wasn't less competitive. I just had to change what I was competitive about.
So you were like judging people go walk around. You seem pretty ungrateful.
That's right. You're not as grateful as me, are you? Let me tell you how. Yeah.
But I like it because you're actually, I'm guessing, as a part of that competitive, you're actually going to be rising and raising people with you. Because if they're around you and you're actually exhibiting and embodying gratitude, chances are they're not going to be less grateful. They're going to be more grateful. So as your ship rises, others rise with you.
And that's the amazing thing about shifting the scorecard. Even to go back to what you just said, if there are other people in the room, now I'm not just comparing my preaching to other people's preaching, right? If someone's in the room that's more grateful than me, I'm actually inspired, Like I'm inspired by your gratitude and I want to be like you. And so I think being competitive about the right things, like you just said, not only changes how we see other people who are doing the right things or living the right way, but I think it inspires the people who doesn't want to be around someone that's like super grateful or super kind or super joyful or generous.
I'm going to hit pause on my conversation with Sammy right now to encourage you to grab a note card or a piece of scrap paper and actually write down one thing that you want to be competitive about that's on the right scorecard. Now back to my conversation with Sammy. Let's brainstorm a little bit together in real time here in the 3 Words Podcast studio. So I'm thinking about, what do I want to be competitive at? What does it look like to walk into a social gathering, to a party, to a family reunion, and actually say, I'm going to make it my goal to actually beat everyone in the room in regards to how inquisitive and how interested, to be more interested in people than being interesting to people. I'm going to ask the best questions. I'm going to listen.
I'm going to be the best listener.
In the room. Because again, some of those gatherings, most people who show up at a party are thinking, I'm going for myself and who sees me versus who do I see? And so I'm just brainstorming a little bit. That could be a really cool competition.
Absolutely. Like I'll give you an example from even my marriage. There was a season where I was like, and I didn't tell my wife this, but I was like,
wait,
okay.
Is she going to hear this now for the first time?
We ended up, she picked up on it. Okay. But I really got to a point where I was like, hey, I want to outserve my wife. Like I want to do that. And I actually didn't do that. For me, it was actually the competition actually helped me to be able to overcome my selfishness. And so it was actually being competitive. I was like, hey, I like to win. And so guess what? I'm going to just outserve her. And so this is actually kind of nerdy, but every day I started tracking in my phone, like I was going to do something and then I was going to send her a text at the end of the day to be like, hey, man, when you did that, that was amazing. And so for the first week, she's like, oh, this is cool. After 2 weeks, she's like, what are you doing? I'm just trying to be the most grateful person that I can be. And so even in a relationship, I think that there are some attributes and things that we can do that can really just create some really healthy, fun scenarios.
Well, and you know what? I've got to call you out a little bit. Did you learn that from me as your life coach? Because I teach that.
I'm sure you said that somewhere and I put it in my back pocket.
Well, I use it with couples when they come and they're talking to me about their conflict and the fact that they're losing the fire and this idea that I don't know if we're really meant for each other and we're having such a hard time. I love to give them that challenge, that little competition for the next couple of weeks. Try to outserve the other person.
So fun.
Go back to the beginning, what you used to do. Try to outserve the person. And 9 times out of 10, they'll come back to their next session giggling, holding hands and laughing. Because what happens is, and I love having this conversation, our choices bring the emotions on the back end. Typically, we're making decisions out of our emotions, which our emotions lie to us most of the time, but actually make good choices and then our positive emotions will flow after. So what I'm hearing you say is, as you try to be more competitive in the right things with the correct scorecard, you will probably feel more alive.
That's right.
Which, who doesn't want to feel more alive?
And it's who we want to be. And that's the thing too. It's who we all want to be, and it's who we all want to be around, right? And so regardless of your religious affiliation or what you believe about God or don't believe about God, like most of us want to be kind and generous. We want to be good listeners and we want to be servants, And so it's just, reorienting our lives and saying, I'm going to double down on whatever it's going to take for me to become that kind of person. And I'm going to be competitive and I'm going to have great ambition about the things that matter the most.
Well, as you know, and you're a big soccer player, but as you know, I work with sports teams, both professionally and at the collegiate level. And I love the fact that even friends on these various teams are competing for the number one position to actually get to play. Because, even a football team of 105 guys on the sidelines, not all of them are playing.
Gets to play. That's
actually most don't get to play. So there's, but I love the fact, and we're encouraging them to keep competing so that everyone gets better. But what happens sometimes in our sports teams, and I'm sure you see this even in your teams, in the different teams you've been involved with, is that we want it for ourselves. The competition's more about me getting what I want and you not getting what I want versus competing where we're all going to strive toward the thing that we want, which is victory for a team, which has become the best organization. So I like to distinguish this idea between comparison and comparing. Comparison, I think, is the dark side of what you're talking about, where it's like, I'm comparing myself to you as you walk into that room that you talked about with pastors. Am I in the best? You want to be in the top 3 and others don't get to be in the top 3.
That's right.
Whereas if you're most grateful, it's like, you're not going to be threatened by the fact that now there's 100 who are fighting you for gratitude. And so comparison, its dark side is, I want what you have and I don't want you to have it. Comparing is, wow, I'm admiring this quality in your life.
Inspired,
I'm inspired by this. I want you to keep it, keep going, and I want it as well. So we both become the better version of ourselves as we compare without comparison. Thoughts on that?
And I just think, as I was listening to you, I think fundamentally part of it is remembering like there's enough joy for everybody, right? And I think that's what the dark side tries to hide from us, right? And so I think if I'm not in the top 3, then what does that say about me? Then I'm not enough. I don't have enough. I'm not that gifted, But I think being competitive about the right things reminds us that there is enough. So I can win and you can win. And it's actually fun when we both win about the right things. And so,
well, I think you said a little phrase earlier that I'm going to see if I can grab it again, but this is who I want to be. And this is who I want to be around.
Yes.
And so to be thinking about on a daily basis, to be more competitive, who do I want to be and compete for that person? And then who do I want to be around? Surround myself with people who are competing for the same kind of things because we resemble with whom we relate.
Can I give you an example? My buddy, John, you've heard me talk about him.
Of course.
He's one of my best friends in the world. And he's so annoying because he's such a good friend. Is such a good friend. And so I'm always like,
a better friend than you?
I want to be a better friend than you. But it's a healthy thing because he's such a good friend. And so I'm always like, man, I'm always asking myself, like, am I as good of a friend to him as he is to me? Like, I need to up my game. Like, I gotta, so it's a bit of that competitive side. But just imagine a world where 2 people are it's like the marriage thing, trying to out-friend each other. It's such, so you want to be around those kind of people.
Out-friending each other, out-serving each other, out-generosity each other. I mean, I'm making up words, but that's a positive way to think about being competitive versus like, I'm going to step on you and climb the ladder. I'm going to step on you to climb the ladder of success and leave you in the dust. Again, it's not who we want to be. It's not the people we want to be around. And we might actually win. You might get that job. You might get that position. You might get that title or that new bonus. But at what cost? It's a cost to your soul. And so being competitive in the wrong things in the long run cost.
That's right.
Probably more than you're willing to pay.
That's right.
Sammy, always a pleasure having you here in the room in the podcast studio. Man, our conversations are just so much fun. I wish people could join us for wings and fries even later tonight because we're going to go out, grab some food and just keep these conversations going. But I'm so glad that our podcast listeners got to get a little glimpse of some of the things that you have to share. So thanks for being my friend and thanks for being with me here today.
So good to be here.
Hey, 3 Words Podcast family. I don't know if you knew this, but actually there is a PDF that can be downloaded for every single episode of 3 Words Podcast on our website at dmbcoaching.com. Would you pick one of your favorite episodes, go to our website and download that and share that episode with a friend? We'll see you in a couple of weeks.